Thank you, Dr. Panosian, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Among the audience, I see many friends, friends who have probably more organizational experience than I have been around, frankly. So thank you for being here tonight. As Dr. Panosian said, we're going to have a conversation. This is not a presentation, this is a conversation. We're going to have a conversation about the necessity of rethinking the Armenian diasporic organizations and their roles and structures in the diaspora. This proved to be a fairly difficult subject for me to explore. So let's see how it's going to go. Let me start by saying that my premise is that...
What's that?
Oh, choose thoughts.
Raise it up. Raise it. There you go. Don't. Okay, talk into it.
This is good?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically the premise, oh yeah, it's much better, I can hear myself. So the premise is that either organizations are going to change starting as soon as possible today, or we are going to lose the future generations, future professional generations, and risk more irrelevancy, because in my opinion, most of our organizations are fairly irrelevant to diasporic communities at this point. And at the worst case scenario, we get to a point of extinction. In fact, organizations do change, but they change very slowly. And they adapt and morph to their geopolitical locations or the regions that they're operating in. And because of that slow change, sometimes they basically create that false image that things are good. But in reality, what I'm proposing is that organizations need to change fundamentally. And we'll see what that fundamental means. So allow me to start with a story. There is this scholar who studied Buddhism extensively. He wants to understand Zen. He goes to a Zen master and asks the Zen master about Zen, teaching him Zen. The Zen master invites him to have tea and starts pouring tea into the cup and keeps pouring the tea. As the scholar is watching the Zen master, the cup gets filled up, and the Zen master keeps pouring the tea. The scholar says, this cup is full, can't get more tea into it. The Zen master says, your mind, your brain is full of your ideas. So before I can show you anything about Zen, you need to empty your cup. So I invite everybody here. I know many of us are coming from huge, extensive organizational background. I invite everybody to sort of empty your collective cup, because I'm going to suggest ideas that might sound not sort of conventional, but I hope that we'll have a chance to discuss them. One of those ideas is that our organizations, we should not view them as holy. In other words, when we do that, we make them untouchable. We make them above critical analysis. And we sort of put them in a level of sort of sanctity so that we cannot critically analyze them or sort of view them. So I invite everybody to sort of put that view aside. Why that is important? Because we need to apply classical organizational models and theories to our own organizations and study them based on scientific analysis that basically usually is applied to organizations. Armenians usually don't let that happen, so I'm inviting everybody to sort of start doing that. Unfortunately, because of that sanctity, our organizations can sort of outlive ourselves. They can continue perpetuating the status quo and slowly morph and adapt and change. That is okay, but what we're losing is opportunity. We're risking the opportunity cost in this case, which is huge. So let's start by establishing where we are today. So this is us. We have a transnation, and what it means is that it's a nation that's dispersed all over the world. We claim that we've been around for 3,500 years, okay? And we have a fairly young republic, a statehood. So we have a nationhood and we have a statehood. Now, interestingly enough, most of this nation lives outside the state. So everybody knows that. That's nothing new. Now, there are some new trends developing in the last couple of years. Armenia is depopulating. Diaspora is sort of, after that initial love fest towards Armenia, Armenia is starting to really focus on itself. Not only that, the older Armenian communities who've been established in the Middle East are basically depopulating too, and everybody's either going west, coming west here, Los Angeles basically, or they're going north, they're going to Russia. Armenians from Armenia are basically migrating to Russia. So these are some of the trends that's been happening in our transnation. Now, this slide is sort of an organizational tile. It shows various organizations that have been around for 100, in the case of the church, for 1,700 years. These organizations were basically in the old world, in our old communities. These organizations have been functioning as the proxy for us, the communities, to basically feel connected to our Armenianness, so to speak. They were perpetuating, or we were perpetuating, our cultural ethnic identity in the bubbles that these organizations were created back in the old communities. What is the problem with that? The problem is that these organizations were mainly doing that. They were perpetuating a status quo. So because of that, they basically became holy. They became our belief system. They created our value system. They shaped the narrative, and which most of the time these concepts, because we attach a sanctity to it, they're above our critical analysis. Question is, when these models have been moved to the new world, to this side of the water, so to speak, who is creating new ideas that is needed in order for the community to function in this side of the world? Where are these new ideas supposed to come from? And who are supposed to generate these new ideas? Sorry about that. So now that's one big sort of question. Another issue, another question, or another phenomenon has been the independence of Armenia. After the independence of Armenia, these organizations sort of lost their relevance in terms of identity, in terms of the source of identity, because anybody from anywhere in the world can basically just buy a ticket, fly to Armenia, and get connected to its Armenian roots. We don't need these organizations to feel Armenian anymore. The Armenia by itself, the concept of Armenia by itself, is serving as a huge sort of sun, so to speak. That's basically generating everything that we need to feel connected to our Armenianness. Okay, whether it's now that's a different story. If we fly to Armenia, you know, we see the good stuff, we see the bad stuff. That's a different story. But at the end of the day, point is that independence of Armenia was a turning point for these organizations. Also, nowadays, because of the technological advances, these organizations lost their monopoly on basically everything Armenian. Now, anybody, anywhere in the world can publish a website and start broadcasting itself through social media or through any electronic platform that's out there. We can basically do what these organizations are doing in terms of asserting our belief system, coming up with whatever we feel or think should be the value system, should be the Armenianness, and broadcast it to the world. So this monopoly on everything Armenian has been broken. Now, these organizations are mainly because they were perpetuating an older system. They're dealing with chronic issues. Some of them are vision, mission, and core values, which in terms of vision, most of them, they have old vision or vague visions. There is this concept called mission creep, which is basically we're trying to do a lot. If you look at the mission statement of many of these organizations, it's not concrete. It includes a laundry list of different missions that an organization with that much resource cannot accomplish. And also in terms of value systems, these organizations are having difficulty identifying their core value systems. So if you ask like 10 people from the same organization, you will come up with different lists of value systems. Then we have the slides are not turning.
Okay.
Okay, it worked. I got a feeling something wasn't right. So, yeah, we talked about mission, vision, and core values. Then we have the leadership deficit. There are various theories in terms of, how the leadership should be, transformational leadership, threshold leadership, and etc. Simply, we, in terms of our leadership, we're entrusting our organizations to well-meaning people who just do not know any better. I mean, in terms of today's capabilities and core competencies, the crust of our leadership is basically not adequate, not professional. If this is a line for visionary leadership, and this is a line for managerial leadership, this is the best case scenario. Our leadership are mostly here. They're neither visionary nor managerial. And then in terms of, I don't know why this is interesting every time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of generational gap. So today, there's a generational gap within these organizations. New generation is more professional, more educated, compared to the previous generations. It is less ideologically and politically inclined. They have weaker sense of obligation and sort of weaker sense of duty towards everything that our community is basically built upon. They are more connected than ever based on the social networks, yet they're more isolated than ever. I remember when I was playing in the streets of Tehran, we had a bunch of kids playing together, but these days you don't see that happening among children. Question is that, do we really have a place, or our organizations, do they have a place for this generation, this new professional generation among them? In our organizations, we sort of claim that we want to give the leadership to the youth, but mostly we're perpetuating the same mentality. If there is this X leader, he or she wants to basically give its position to another X. If a new Y comes along, usually that Y is being marginalized. Usually that Y doesn't have a place. We want to basically perpetuate the same thing. So I basically sort of think that scenario as this fish tank, and that the young fish wants to jump out of it because it gets fed up. Once this young fish jump out of the fish tank, imagine the fish tank is our community, it basically dies because it cannot breathe outside of the water. But the ones that survive, those fish that adapt and survive, meaning the younger generations, now if they go back to the tank, they suffocate in the tank because they change so much that going back to the water, going back to the tank is difficult for them. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario. Now, in terms of, so let's talk about the new trends. Those were the sort of issues, big picture issues that I see our current organizations are grappling with. In terms of 21st century trends, so science and technology are advancing, even faster than ever. Inter and cross-disciplinary approaches and methodologies are used to basically advance all of the science and technology and everything else, basically. Ideologies, the age of ideologies are gone. People want to have a set of ideology, a set of ideas versus a set ideology. There's a big difference between them. Religion and church, younger generation is basically not connected to that concept anymore. Local problems have global ramifications. If, for example, a political entity in Armenia makes a decision, the entire diaspora hears and feels about it. Case in point, the last election in Armenia. Information is abundant and it's in our fingertips. Younger generation do not need to basically go to library. They can find all the information online. And competitive advantage and core competencies are not enough anymore to basically keep an organization in an advanced position. Organizations need to basically build knowledge and manage knowledge. And we're going to get to that point. And then we have the social media. So social media is this new disruptive trend. It's a chaotic, jubilant expression of personal freedom and affirmation, basically. Hundreds of life forms, endless definitions, many experts on this subject. This social media is modulating all the interpersonal and communal and social relationships these days. And basically with the presence of social media, who needs to go to a hike and run to get the news and the gossip and everything else, right? I mean, if I want to know what's happening among my friends, circle of friends, I basically just check my Facebook. I don't go to hike and run to sit around with the rest of the community and talk about issues. So in that sense, social media is replacing that information sharing and information knowledge sharing concept within the community. Now, in terms of future, okay, we will have a future, definitely. There are various trends in, as we discussed, 21st century trends. There are many trends affecting us, our communities, and there will be different scenarios awaiting us. Question is, who is thinking and analyzing these various scenarios? Who's basically generating that knowledge in order for us today to make proper decisions to shape future today? So, we are faced with many challenges. How can we overcome these challenges? How can we answer the strategic fundamental questions that we have? So my basically assertion is that we need to come up with new thinking and analytical organizations and mechanisms in order to understand better how we can basically address our challenges. We need to create knowledge-based organizations. And we need to be able to appeal to the collective intelligence of the newer generation that's coming. So what is a knowledge-based organization? Knowledge-based organization, which in my opinion is going to be our salvation. I am hoping that one day all our organizations are going to turn into knowledge-based organizations. Knowledge-based organizations are those who basically breed and think knowledge. These organizations are taking knowledge management and knowledge creation seriously. They require knowledge creation and knowledge processing and knowledge sharing mechanisms and processes. It's not an easy concept. I mean, these infrastructures, they have to be there, and also the culture has to be there. So, and also in these knowledge-based organizations, there has to be independent sources of knowledge. Imagine a university, for example. There are multiple divisions who are basically working independent from each other, but at the same time, they can talk to each other. They can share the same research. They can create the one concept working together from different angles. Within and without, actually, of the same university. I mean, knowledge is shared among everybody in the world. So there is this misconception that knowledge-based organizations are the ones who are only focused on generating knowledge. That's not the case, actually. Any organization can be a knowledge-based organization. It depends on how that said organization is processing its basically mission, vision, core processes, purpose, and perspective. If these functions, if these processes are done using knowledge, then that organization becomes a knowledge-based organization. Our organizations currently are not knowledge-based organizations. They are built based on custom, tradition, faith, and we usually do not apply knowledge in basically decision-making processes that we have. We use our relationships, but not knowledge. And that's a fundamental distinction that I wanted to make. So obviously, the greater degree to which knowledge is applied makes an organization more knowledge-based. And I wanted to emphasize the realm of knowledge has two portions. One is the ability to use the knowledge, whatever is existing right now, as the realm of knowledge. And the second one is creating the knowledge that we need in order to make better decisions for future. So the two components have to exist. An organization, if a set organization is only using the knowledge that's existing and not generating something new, it's going to die. It's not going to basically revive itself. Because we always need to revive the knowledge bank to come up with, to address the new challenges that we're facing. And if you think about it, none of our organizations have any of these mechanisms whatsoever. So this is a very simple chart showing that in a knowledge-based organizations, how knowledge is applied. We use data, we generate information, out of it knowledge, and then basically decisions, or the wisdom to make decisions. Now this loop is usually not applied in organizations. Which organization do you know that is basically using statistical analysis to come up with any decision? So this process by itself is difficult. I mean, it requires expertise, it requires professional methodologies to be able to get the data, store the data, process the data, and apply the data. And understandably so, it is expensive to do all of this. But I think that based on, I mean, for example, take, I know many young attendees today that are working in very reputable companies. In our jobs, we do this all the time. When I'm designing a circuit for any rover, I have to do this, right? Otherwise, I cannot pass my design reviews. My circuit is not going to work. The system is not going to work. Interestingly enough, when I go to an Armenian organization, I do not apply the same methodology. I go back, I switch the hat, I go back to the old way of doing things, relationship-based, not knowledge-based, which I think it is one of the reasons that the status quo is perpetuated. Why is this important? Because the quality of the decisions that needs to be made in order for us to address our challenges in future has to improve. In my opinion, the decisions that we're making today, strategic or tactical, are low quality. No organization backs up its own decisions with any analysis. They come up with decisions, but if you ask what's the rationale behind it, you basically just do not get any. So what it is that we need to change? There is this famous saying that the same level of consciousness that creates a problem cannot solve the problem itself. And that is really true. If I am causing a problem, I cannot solve that problem. I need to change my level of consciousness in order to be able to address that problem. Now, there is a fatalistic view. Max Planck, one of my favorite physicists, said that in science, usually, it is not the case that new theories come and the older generations, the older sort of physicists, they just accept the new theories. That's usually not the case. The older physicists, they have to die, and the younger generation, when they come up, they already take the new theory as given. So when the generations change, that's basically when the change happens. It is not the case that one generation suddenly wakes up and says, okay, I am changed. That's usually the case. I was reading this research the other day that when a prominent scientist dies, usually a lot of new theories are introduced because that prominent scientist is holding back. The younger generations are afraid of basically introducing the new theory, so they wait, or that prominent theory is blocking all of that energy, and the change comes when basically the generation is turning. So in terms of things that needs to change, our thinking obviously, our attitude, our procedures, the planning processes, the message, and the communication platforms. All of these things in our organizations, they need to change. But the question is, can the existing generation change that? And unfortunately, I don't think so. I think a newer generation has to come and basically make all that change happen. And I believe that with creation of knowledge-based organizations, we can address our challenges, our future challenges, and come up with, and turn the challenges into opportunities. So now what? What should basically be done? In my opinion, we need to elevate the level of urgency of how the current status quo is not viable, and fundamental change needs to happen. We need to tap into professional generation, your generation. We need to put younger professionals in leadership roles. We need to do a better job of strategic planning. We need to revisit our bylaws and procedures and make them modern and knowledge-based. We need to apply multidisciplinary knowledge-based approach. And also, we need to create knowledge-based organizations and think tanks and institutions. I forgot to flip through them. So these are, in my opinion, some of the concrete steps that our current organizations they need to take in order to be able to start the change process. There's this saying that organizations don't change, people do. It is very difficult to change the culture of an organization when it's already set for 100-something years. But the hope is that when the new generation comes, the culture of that organization changes. Or the other alternative is that we just leave the current organizations and create new ones, because the current ones resist change. I usually take the longer view on these things. There's this story, I'm going to end with this. There is this story that a traveler goes to a place and he sees that 3 people are building something. He asks one of them, and the answer is that I'm shaping a rock. He asks the second one says, I'm building a wall. He asks the third worker, and the third worker says, I'm building a cathedral. So I usually take the long, and I invite everybody to take the longer view. We need to basically start the change mechanism so that we can jumpstart the best opportunities for us that is going to happen in future. But in order for that to happen, we need to start today. Thank you for giving me your time.